The Unified Information Center continues its work. First, about the frontline situation today. In the morning, the Azeri armed forces continued their offensive activities along different vectors of the front line. Apart from the armed combat along the front line, throughout the day there was rocket shelling of various populated settlements in Artsakh, city of Martakert with its villages, and the city of Berdzor with its neighboring villages. 3 shells fell on the territory of Berdzor. Through the day, especially hot, crossfire was in the south of the center, in Sheher, Jivanik and neighboring villages. There were subversive intrusion activities by Azeri gangs and subversive groups, and there was work to neutralize them. Along these dimensions, there's clear success we have scored. In particular, almost completely Sheher was purged with the woods surrounding it. And in the woods surrounding some other settlements, the neutralization work carries on as we speak. At the same time, in the southern direction, throughout almost all of the day, the Azeri armed forces units attempted to attack the direction of Vorotan. Several such attempts have failed, after which, sustaining major losses, they were thrown back. Some units have been dismantled, they've lost their armored vehicles, and they fled, attempting to find refuge in the neighboring woods and gorges. South of Berdzor, specifically in the dimension along the Hakkari River bed towards north, upstream, they were pushed further back south under defense of our armed forces. The general tension is preserved. The main battles are in different nidai. There are no clear lines of separation. Along different roads, rivers and nidai, there are attempting offensives that are neutralized by our armed forces. This is the real situation on the ground. And I have continually mentioned, and I keep stating, our success is sustainable. The war is grave, difficult. Often there are situations when, in perception of some people, on the basis of piecemeal local data, the situation may seem to have no positive outcome, but that is not the case, notwithstanding that there are certain advancements by the enemy at certain dimensions. They get excruciating blows, whether day or night. Before we reflect on Q&A, like I see there are quite a few questions, I'll hand the floor over to resuscitation surgeon, anesthesiologist Lilit Musaelyan. Good evening, dear compatriots, comrades in arms, my people. Yes, we're at war as we speak. Everyone participates in the war, whether it's the state, whether it's the population at large, all Armenians. For us, the visible war is fought at least along 2 front lines. One is in defense of our borders, preserving our identity and survival, and the other front line is the fight against coronavirus disease. And we have a retreat with respect to the pandemic, since a particular segment of the population has ceased to properly fight the disease and no longer abides with the regulations, and that annihilates the efforts of those who fight it. In order to get the virus defeated, we all have to, in an atmosphere of mutual assistance, act in unison. I do not doubt that there will ever be anyone who will disagree that all of our potential needs to be invested in the battlefield. There is no denying that the coronavirus results not only in adding to the state's expenditure, but it also takes up valuable time of the medical professionals, not to deal with those hit with arms and ammunition, but those hit with the virus. The infected are dropping out from the fight for the motherland throughout the course of their treatment, as well as thereafter while convalescing, because that takes a lot of time as well. They drop out also those drop out who are suspected of being infected or transmitting the infection. After all, we can communicate it to those who put up fight along our borders. We have to, the defenders of our motherland have to be healthy. Our medical professionals, we have to be and remain healthy, because our struggle today is not aimed at resolving the issues of the past 30 years, but those of the last 500 years. It's not incidental that the enemy has chosen the background of the pandemic, the spirit of the pandemic, in order to attack us. Their ally is the coronavirus, their ally of choice. If we defeat their ally, we will erode and undermine the enemy and make our victory closer. In defeating the pandemic, first and foremost, we have to be disciplined and then demanding of others as well. Therefore, we need to abide by the rules of life written for the period of the pandemic, for the sake of our brave soldiers, for the sake of our victory, for the sake of the eternal existence of our nation. Stay healthy. Thank you. Let's move on to the Q&A.
Factor AM.
A question from Factor AM. As of 8 p.m., did we have in Vardenis another UAV shot down that fell down in the Vardenis territory? What's the information about this incident? At this point in time, I do not possess such information, but it is quite possible. We will consolidate the data coming in, and if that's corroborated, we'll share it with you. Lori TV channel, the transfer of armed units. There is an online map disseminated about these movements, which is completely misinformation. Cannot this be contested or struck down? From tomorrow onwards, we will release new map data, and I have to tell you that I'm aware of these maps. This is being done since day one of the war. This is mostly what Ukrainian bloggers are sharing, and that fails to reflect the accurate and complete information. We receive this question all the time, whether this map is an accurate representation. It's not the representation on the map or not on the map. In the perception of the population at large, the map implies movement of troops and lines of contact, but since the fighting is mostly in night eye, the maps fail to reflect accurately the situation, but we shall share our own map eventually. What's transpiring in Varteni? Shushan Stepanyan stated about shooting down one UAV, Radio Free Liberty. There is an air alert in Stepanakert. Yes, minutes ago we received information that there is most probably rocket shelling of Stepanakert. Several units of rockets have been released, as you have seen throughout the war. Azerbaijan, by the end of the day, different segments of the front line tries to cover up for its failures, or tries to get vengeance of the civilian population. This is already the third or fourth incidents when the against Artsakh population, mostly artillery fire, is being used. What's the difference between fighting groups of terrorists and fighting groups of well-trained military? These are tactical issues pertaining to the military science, but believe me, sometimes this difference is significant and great, sometimes it's irrelevant, depends on the situation. 24 times. What primary items are required and needed by the troops at the front line? The troops at the front line do not need anything in particular. Whatever minor needs emerged on the fly, they are addressed and resolved through the relevant services, logisticals. If anyone wants to be of help in any matter, we've already made statements to that effect. There are appropriate addresses that you have to. Mostly it's the Ministry of Emergency Situations that coordinates these efforts, and the relevant outline numbers and addresses of the MOD have already been published by us. And if we're talking about fundraising, then we have emphasized more than once, the funds have to be directed to the Pan-Armenian Fund, or All-Armenian Fund, and the fund for the insurance of the military servicemen. Try to use those two receptacles. Could one say that the density of fire has lessened along the line of contact compared to the initial days? Yes, by the end of the day, it's not the same. It's after all, the sides are sustaining losses, the armed forces are losing their capacity and potential, and it cannot compare to the major offensive of day one. But if we look at certain episodes when they try to unleash a major offensive or attack particular settlements for a short period, there is a resurgence of the density of fire. May we assume that the failures of the enemy at the front line are in inverse correlation to the attacks on the civilian population? Yes, like I said, they're trying to be vengeful against the civilian population. Since there are no more questions, in conclusion, I would like, as I reiterated many times before, whether during the briefings or the daily statements, whenever we state that the situation is grave or tense or whatever, this comes to attest that we do describe the realistic situation at various segments of the front line. We specify the vectors. We mentioned that in the south or the north there is relative calm, and the other segments it's graver. More than that, of course I understand your desire to learn more. Fortunately, as opposed to Azerbaijan, we try to work very transparently with our nation. There is no prohibition or bans on the information space in Armenia, with the exception of Azeri websites, which quite naturally, in compliance with the rules of the war, we're spreading misinformation for our public. We are absolutely free in every other respect as opposed to the Azeri society. Please appreciate that, understand that. I understand that maximalistic perceptions exist for every bridge, every village, every small rivulet to get utmost detailed information. But, dear friends, during the war it's not appropriate to come up with such demands in conditions of war. So we present the favorable situation as favorable, the grave situation as grave, but the dynamics of war is volatile. The situation fluctuates very rapidly, therefore one should not revert to absolute euphoria or the depression that some, especially over the internet, succumb to. We are sure to win. This is it.